The story begins with a man swung his sword and saying he was once Khalid hero. The hero saved the world from the monarch of the underworld, the Underlord, who had stained half of the world with blood. He was called the Dragon Slayer King, and he was Aden Albireo. However, when the monarch of the underworld died, a curse fell upon him. At that moment, Aden Albireo was on the ground and he cursed. Then he was surrounded by the people who betrayed him, and he asked them that didn't they all knew it from the beginning, whose desires to destroy iniquity shall become the new iniquity. But the man in front told him that it's a legend that has been passed down to the imperial family. According to him, he had no choice. The monarch of the underworld is a perpetual existence, and those who kill him don't just pass away, but become the new monarch of the underworld. At that moment, this man smirked, and he told Aden that it would be a great honor for him, the Dragon Slayer King, who killed the monarch of the underworld, to take up his mantle. He was begging Aden to sacrifice himself for the country. Nonetheless, another man said that they simply ran out of options, and he did not seek Aden's forgiveness. Aden Albireo was mad because that man said that he wouldn't even ask for forgiveness, and he just gritted his teeth. Then this lady was holding a weapon, and she smiled at that moment. She told Aden that he'd been working hard all this time. Now, rest in peace. Aden was shocked, and as he stated, it was a Grand Seal Gleipnir. At this point, Aden slowly disappeared, and he thought that they were friends. He considered them to be comrades, and he trusted that they were the greatest of allies. But it was all a lie. Aden was cursing, and according to him, it's better to die than to be trapped there forever. At this point, they sealed him in an endless abyss, a place where time didn't exist, a bottomless pit. As he fell into that eternal darkness, he kept repeating the thought that he would kill them all by his hands. At that moment, when he spoke, the two men in front were both shocked. The man on the right said that he just said something, and the other man called him master and asked him if he was awake. Upon hearing them, he was confused about what was going on and where he was. Then these couples suddenly came, and the lady was crying while asking him if he was all right. "My precious boy, you're awake," the man stated. When he opened his eyes, Aden was shocked and confused at that moment. Then he asked them, "Who are they?" This lady was startled and told him that he'd been sleeping for 2 days and he must be out of his mind. Instantaneously, the lady hugged him tight and said that she was his mother, and she called him Aden Remes. At that moment, Aden was shocked and confused that the lady called him Aden Remes, not Aden Albireo. Starting that day, Aden Albireo was reincarnated as Aden Remes, the Duke's eldest son. All of a sudden, Aden felt pain in his head, and his mother asked him if he was okay. Then suddenly, all memories were brought back to him. Aden was shocked and confused about what are these memories and why he was being bombarded with memories of a man named Aden Remes. Then he looked at his hand, and Aden was curious if is this the 450th year in the imperial calendar, and if isn't it 15 years before he died. He was abandoned by his companions before he could become the monarch of the underworld and forced to commit suicide. He was pretty sure in the void, the boundary between worlds, he died. At this point, Aden was mad and said that even though they were begging him now, he wouldn't know if he'd forgive him. He'd find them all and kill them one by one. But suddenly, he was shocked upon seeing them. However, on that note, the previous owner of his body was a scumbag. Aden was confused that even if he came back to life, why on earth did he end up in a body like this? And why was Aden Remes passed out for 2 days, drunk and drenched by the rain? According to him, if he weren't the Duke's son, he would have already been eaten to death. Meanwhile, the next day, Aden was looking at himself in the mirror, and he said that this sure was awkward. But he was confused if he was really Aden Albireo, or if could it be that he just dreamed about the whole life of a person named Albireo. All of a sudden, Aden was shocked and said that now that he thought about it, why not he would check the powers he had. Then he opened the system, and it suddenly popped up. It is stated in his information that he was a human race. His titles are all unavailable: the King of the Mercenaries, Reaper of the Warlocks, and Nemesis of Tolos. The titles marked as unavailable will have their restrictions lifted sequentially upon qualification. At that moment, Aden was stunned, and in his mind, the power he gained by consuming the heart of the Berserk dragon, along with the epithet Dragon Slayer King. According to him, he still has it so. It was not just a dream. However, it does bother him that his name is broken. Aden was still confused about though it even mattered. But suddenly, he laughed and said that this must be a gift from the gods. Now he just needs to find them and tear them limb from limb. Suddenly, a disciple appeared, and he was shocked upon looking at Aden laughing alone. Then he asked him what was up, and the disciple just smiled, but he was confused about what Aden was saying. Nonetheless, he told him that he brought him something to drink. Aden immediately grabbed it and told him that it was nice timing since he was really thirsty, and he thanked the disciple. But this man was afraid, and he was confused about why is Aden saying thank you now and what does that even mean. Aden was laughing while repeatedly saying thank you, and he asked the disciple if this was good and if he could get some water for him. Nonetheless, this man was trembling in fear at that moment. However, Aden was drinking the coffee that the disciple gave him, and he said that it tasted lovely. Then the disciple was just looking at him, and he was confused if his young master liked it, or if this for real, and if Aden really said thank you. Nevertheless, Aden asked him if he had anything else to say, and the disciple said no, sir. Then he immediately left, and his companion asked him how he got out of that place alive, and he told him that their young master just said thank you. The other disciple was confused about it, and he asked him what is it now and if he had gone crazy. Going back to Aden, he was stunned and cursed at that moment. According to him, he shouldn't speak mindlessly because his disciple overreacted just for saying thank you. Aden was confused that now that he'd regressed 15 years in the past, what happened to the original him, and if does that exist separately from him in this timeline. But according to him, by this time, he should have gained his independence from Master Balkan, the former mercenary king, and he got to find it out. All of a sudden, Aden went out of his room and he called Philip, one of the disciples. These two were both shocked, and according to Philip, he never called him by name before. However, Aden told him that he had a few questions for him. Then this man was startled and trembled in fear at that moment, and Aden smiled and asked him if he was okay. Nonetheless, the other disciple tapped his shoulder and told him that thank you for everything, and he will be remembered. But Philip was speechless, and he was confused about what the hell was wrong with Aden today. Then Aden asked him about the mercenary king, and Philip was shocked. Aden asked him what he knew about the mercenary king's disciple, and in his mind, he was quite famous as the mercenary king's disciple. Then Philip told him that rumors are that the mercenary king went missing some time ago. But he told Aden that he'd never heard anything about the mercenary king having a disciple. Aden was shocked, and he was confused about what Philip meant by that the mercenary king didn't have disciples. Then what is the original him doing? And where did he go? In his past life, in a certain ghetto, Aden was walking when he met a man, and at that moment he said that he would try this guy today. Then he bumped into the man and stole something from him. He continued walking. Then he smirked and said, "What a big shot. To think he was carrying such a huge money bag." Nonetheless, that was Aden Albireo in childhood. But unfortunately, the man looked at him and instantaneously, he was behind Aden immediately. Then he smiled and said, "You're quite gutsy, aren't you?" At that moment, Aden was shocked and speechless. This man was the king of mercenaries, Balkan, and he asked Aden how dare he think of stealing his money. Then suddenly, he grabbed Aden's shoulder, and he was trembling in fear, and he said sorry to him. Balkan smiled and told him that he'd got a pretty sturdy body. Henceforth, he was already his disciple, and Aden was confused at that moment. Nonetheless, Balkan pulled him and told him that he'd train him to be the best mercenary, and he just laughed. That's how he met Master Balkan. From then on, he made a name for himself as Master Balkan's disciple. And later, after slaying the Berserker dragon, he earned the nickname the Dragon Slayer King. At the present time, Philip was shocked and told him that he'd never heard any rumors about the mercenary king having a disciple. Then Aden was startled and stunned at that moment. According to him, there's no way that the disciple of the king of mercenaries, Aden Albireo, doesn't exist in this timeline. Meanwhile, in the hall, the disciple on the left asked his companion if he thought the young master had changed lately. Then the other disciple said yes, last time Philip spilled wine, but he still didn't throw anything at him. He even thanked him, and he suddenly started calling him by his name in a friendly manner. According to him, they say people change after a life-threatening experience, and he guesses it's true. Nonetheless, he was confused if Aden was really all right. As stated by one of the disciples, Aden has lately looked spiritless and his eyes seemed so empty. Going back to Aden, according to him, he seriously has nothing to do. His meals are prepared by the servants, and he doesn't have to do the dishes either. In his spare time, he even tried searching for Aden Albireo, but as expected another him didn't exist. But he was curious and worried about the betrayal he suffered, his hatred and his revenge. All of a sudden, Aden was startled upon seeing these two men sparring. According to him, there are many knights in the duchy. Suddenly, a man came and asked him why he was there. This man was Aden Remes' younger brother, Karl Remes. Unlike the former owner of this body, who was a scumbag, Karl is diligent and has already become a knight. Despite being the second son, he even has the right to succession. The only thing wrong with him is that he has no respect for his brother at all. At this point, Carl was mad and he was asking Aden why he was there, and why shouldn't he be drinking like an alcoholic as usual. As stated by Aden, Carl must have found his elder brother pathetic, seeing him busy playing and drinking all day. Aden can see it from his facial expression, his disgust toward his brother, and his sense of relative superiority. However, Aden told him that he just watching the trainees because he was bored. Then Carl said that the training of the knights is no spectacle. If he is not there to spar, he must get lost. Aden was stunned and confused about it. But now that he thinks about it, he hasn't held a sword since the fiasco. Then he told Carl that it was very well, but Carl was shocked and asked him what he said. Aden looked at him and he told Carl that he'd spar. Meanwhile, at the training grounds, a man in front of Aden kneeled and said that trainee knight Basin of the Remes Knights greets young master Aden before the sparring. Then Aden just looked at him and said good. Nonetheless, one knight was watching them, and he asked the man beside him if should they stop this since Aden was still the young master. After all, then the other man told him that, well, Basin probably doesn't want to get fired, so he'll lose on purpose. This man was looking at Aden and he felt nervous at that moment. According to him, this is bad and he can't believe he has to spar with this scum out of the blue. He was also confused about how he lost to someone so weak without it seeming staged. However, Aden was looking at him, and in his mind, this guy was obviously thinking about how to lose on purpose. Then Aden smiled and said that it's been a while since he got to warm up, and he was curious how about he poke him a bit by going all out. At this point, they both raised their wooden sword and Aden told him not to try to lose on purpose and just do his best. Then he asked him if he agreed that a trainee knight who loses to a weak alcoholic is pretty much useless. He smirked and told him that if he lost, he'd have to have him kicked out of the order, and Basin was shocked at that moment. Nevertheless, Carl was looking at them and in his mind, that scum has finally lost it. Aden has never even held a sword, but now he wants to seriously spar with a trainee knight. Then Basin told their young master that he would begin. He took a step and attacked Aden, but he managed to block it. Then Aden gritted his teeth and according to him, it hurt. This body was much weaker than he thought. But for some reason, he wants to exchange more blows. They both sparring and Basin was mad at that moment. These knights were shocked upon seeing them and the man on the right was worried about Aden and what if he got hurt. Then this man just gritted his teeth and he was confused about how is the young master holding his own. Carl was also shocked and Basin was curious why won't Aden do down. He was confused as to why can't his sword reach him since he was sure that Aden wouldn't stand a chance. However, they bumped their swords and according to Aden, this feels refreshing, and he can feel the hot blood coursing through his veins. Then Basin was shocked at that moment, and Aden just smirked. In his mind, he hadn't had this exhilaration in a long time. The other knights were shocked, and the man behind said that there was no way that Basin was being pushed back. Carl was mad, and according to him that scum is gaining the upper hand against a trainee. Aden would get beaten up by street dogs. At this point, Basin was shocked when he saw that Aden's attacks had changed. It's as if he was holding back all this time. He was confused about how on earth Aden performing such moves. But according to Aden, after living lazily for so long, it must have slipped his mind. Even though this body is weak without any muscle, he is Aden Albireo, the Dragon Slayer King, who killed the Berserk dragon. At this point, Aden swung his sword, and Basin seems to be retreating. Then suddenly, Aden pointed his sword at Basin, and he was shocked at that moment. Aden just smiled and asked Basin if he was going to surrender. However, Aden looked at the other knights, and they were murmuring if Basin really lost to their young master, and this doesn't make any sense. Then Aden laughed and stated thanks a lot. Carl. The spar was refreshing, and Carl just smirked and told him that he was glad to hear that. Then Aden waved his hand and told them that he'd come by often, so they could spar again. He'd get going first, and everyone can do their best. Carl was stunned, and he was confused if Aden was really the same bastard young master that he knew. And the other man said that he was wondering the same thing too. Meanwhile, when the night comes, Aden was looking at his hand and said that he couldn't believe this body couldn't handle even one duel. Then he smirked and he suddenly lay in his bed at this moment. Aden sighed and said that he was able to let out his frustrations, though. And this is also a new opportunity. The heavens granted him another chance in life for revenge. But according to him, those guys are so damn talented that they can be called one-man armies. Considering that they also have high status, it sure won't be easy. the Night King and the heir to the Grand Duchy of Jasilbeta. The iron-blooded saint was chosen by the Slaughter cult, Speaker, and the great archmage, Shora, and the second in command of the Immortalitarian Empire and the great alchemist, Calcis. According to Aden, he can't stand a chance against them at the moment, and he might also need to fight them all alone. In order to achieve his revenge, he must wipe them out before they join forces. The moment they join hands, the country of the past will have a hard time. As he stated, he has to get this all done before the coalition for subjugating the Dark Magicians forms in 5 years. To do that, he needs to start by tearing apart and repairing this goddamn body. In this state, he can't even defeat a single goblin, let alone those guys. So he thought of a method that would do the job. Meanwhile, the next day in the morning, Philip came and Aden gave him something and he was shocked. Then he asked his young master if he wished to buy all of these. He told Aden that he was staying quiet for a while, and he asked him what on earth he was planning on doing this time. Then Aden was puzzled, and he asked Philip if is there a problem with what he requested. Philip was checking on it and told him that even if he buy a top-quality holy potion, aren't these expensive ingredients? Then he was suddenly shocked when he noticed that it was all poisonous plants. Nonetheless, Aden was silent, and in his mind, even if he explained why he needed these ingredients, they'd probably doubt him either way, but it couldn't be helped. Then he tapped Philip's shoulder and Aden was confused if the owner of his body must have done something like this before. He smirked and asked Philip if he was okay with it, knowing it was dangerous though. Then Aden whispered to him and asked him if he would play with him if he told him. Aden said that imagining it is so fun already, and it's been boring because he'd been quiet these days. Then he asked Philip if they had revisited the old days. All of a sudden, Philip immediately ran away while stating that he had no objections and that he'd buy them right away. Aden was startled while he was smiling at that moment. According to him, he needs to take advantage of whatever he can in this life, while he wouldn't have thought of such things in his past life. Now that he was the son of a duke rolling in money, it's a different story. He'd experienced a body that broke through mortal limits as a swordmaster before, so he'd be able to get to that level faster than anyone else. And this method is far from normal. However, 1.5 months later, Aden had prepared something and he was standing in front of it, and he just sighed. Then he called Philip and told him to give him the mana potion. In an instant, Philip immediately handed it to him, and Aden drank it. According to him, pushing the body to its limits with training, then restoring it with mana potions. This is the break then heal method. A single potion is about as much as a month's living expenses for commoners, but being the son of a loaded duke makes this method possible, and his secret weapon. Suddenly, he called Philip and asked him where the things that he had asked for were. Then Philip told him that they were delivered to his room, and in his mind, he wanted to ask Aden what he was planning to do with those ingredients. But he remembered what Aden asked him last night, and Philip countered that he was not curious at all. However, Aden went to his room, and he was looking for the ingredients at that moment. Then when he saw the flower of despair and the hell flower, he was glad that Philip really bought all the poisonous plants. But never did he think he'd use this method, and here he was. Then suddenly, he remembered these two who had betrayed him and said that Calci and Shora created the theory. While the poison wreaks havoc, the body will use everything it can to desperately survive, unlocking its hidden potential. As he stated, he can easily die from this, but he bought a top-quality holy potion for this, so it'll be fine. Then Aden was about to eat the poisonous flower and said that, well, he already overcome death once. All of a sudden, he was mad after eating it, and he even finished the holy potion. He covered his mouth and he suddenly kneeled at that moment. Aden was panting and said that it hurt so bad, and he had to do this 100 more times. But his mana flow is definitely smoother, and as expected from the past life of those who betrayed him. All of a sudden, there was someone asked, "Is it fun, King of Dragon Slayers?" Then Aden was shocked, and he seemed familiar with that voice he heard. Aden was angry and asked someone where he was and why the hell is he there, and he must show himself. According to Aden, he could never forget that voice, even if he wanted to. Suddenly, Philip came and he felt nervous at that moment. Then he was shocked upon seeing Aden, but Aden told him to get out. Nonetheless, Philip told him that there was a loud noise and Aden glared at him and asked him if must he make him say it again, and he told Philip to get out. Then Philip opened the door and he was about to leave while telling Aden that he understood. At this point, Aden was mad, and according to him, he definitely heard it and it was no hallucination. Then suddenly, someone appeared in front and Aden was confused and asked if it was his Underlord. According to him, he knows his real name and just why is he there. Then when he turned back, suddenly the Underlord laughed at him and asked, "I caught you, haven't I?" He told him that it had been a while since the king of dragon slayers, Aden Albireo. At this moment, Aden was mad and the Underlord was teasing him that he got caught. Then Aden was stunned and the Underlord was telling him that it's been a while, Dragon Slayer King. And Aden was just mad at that moment. Then he shouted and said, "You scoundrel, Underlord, why are you here? I definitely saw your end with my own eyes." But the Underlord told him that it looked like he missed him a lot. Too bad he doesn't have a physical body, so he can't look at him. Nonetheless, Aden sighed and asked him how he was talking to him if he'd lost his body. Then the Underlord asked him if had he forgotten that in the end, he died while becoming the Underlord. At this point, Aden clenched his fist and he was confused about what he meant. Aden asked him if he was saying that he was the Underlord now. Then the Underlord told him that it was half right and half wrong. At the moment of his death, he transferred his soul into Aden's body. Originally, he planned to take over his flesh and resurrect himself. Then Aden laughed and told him that his suicide failed his plan. Aden was thinking at that moment, and he asked him if he was saying that his soul exists within him. And the Underlord told him that he could say that. Then Aden asked him how do we kill that soul, and the Underlord was just speechless. Aden was confused, and he asked him if should he pour holy power into his body. Or is the only way to do that for them to die together? But the Underlord told him to wait for a moment and listen to him. He told the Dragon Slayer King, Aden, that he was different from how he was in the past. Then Aden asked him how, and in the end, he's still a being that loves madness and chaos. According to the Underlord, the madness and chaos that Aden witnessed were not originally him, but due to the link with the demon god, that link was severed when he got trapped in the void. Then Aden thinks that that explains why he seemed more composed than the Underlord he saw back then. Back then, he was an insane lunatic who couldn't hold a normal conversation. But the demon god, that's the first he'd heard of him. As stated by the Underlord, the demon god, also known as the original sin, is a being of pure malice, whom even the gods are wary of. In the past, he was a being cursed to carry out the demon's god's will. Then Aden stated, "DC. Then let me ask you one last question. Was this situation also a part of your plan?" But the Underlord was confused and asked him what situation. Aden asked him traveling back 15 years to possess the body of Aden Remes. Was that his doing? And he told Aden that he could say that. When he entered his body, he tried to use the dragon's mana he possessed to turn back time. Suddenly, Aden was shocked and asked him if is that even possible. Then the Underlord said that dragons are beings created as agents of the gods. They can interfere with the laws of the world. Using the power of the dragon mana, it's not an impossible task. But Aden asked him why didn't he use it to escape from the void instead of turning back time. Then Underlord said that it was because he felt tired all of a sudden and he shall rest for now. And the Underlord suddenly left him and disappeared. However, another month had passed. Since then, he occasionally talked to Aden. Having him inside his body was unsettling, but at the same time, it was comforting to have someone who remembered his past. All of a sudden, he was shocked when he saw his scarecrow. In his mind, this training method is definitely effective, but the scarecrow won't be enough now. Aden was suddenly stunned when he saw the knights doing their practice. Then Aden laughed and said that there they are, his new practice dolls. But suddenly the Underlord told him that he really suited their side better than the hero's side. Then Aden was annoyed and told him to shut up. At this point, he was holding a holy potion and asked the Underlord if he wanted him to gulp down a whole bottle of it. Then the Underlord told Aden that no one could fit the role of a hero better than him. According to Aden, while training with poisonous herbs, he realized the holy power in the holy potion caused this guy since he's the source of evil. Then Aden told the Underlord that he'd better be careful. Suddenly, he was startled when he saw a man and said that he looked familiar, but he was confused about where he had seen him. Then one knight called him Lo and told him to pay attention. Nonetheless, Lo told his boss that he'd do better. At that moment, Aden was shocked after knowing his name. He was confused if that guy was the free knight Lo. According to him, he looked so different from his previous life, he didn't recognize him. He used to pretend to be a knight despite being a mercenary, earning the nickname the Free Knight, so he was there. Lo certainly had a flawed personality, and Aden owed his life to him several times. There were a few S-rank mercenaries, including Aden, but that guy Lo died while fighting the crazy dragon with them. Aden just sighed, and in his mind, he thought that he'd see his face in hell. Now, he finally feels like he'd returned to the past. All of a sudden, they called them, and they were all shocked upon seeing him. Then the head of the night asked him, "What is it?" But Aden came to Lo, and Lo was startled, and asked him if he was talking to him. Suddenly, Aden came closer to him, and he was mad at that moment. Then he asked him if he just said if he was talking to him. And isn't it proper to state his name and rank when a superior speaks to him? Instantaneously, Lo bowed down in his front and said sorry. Apprentice Knight Lo, greeting young Master Aden. And at that moment, Aden was just laughing. Then Lo was mad, and in his mind, he couldn't focus anyway. He was confused about why is this ruffian suddenly picking on him. But suddenly, Aden smiled at him and asked, "You just thought, why is this ruffian picking on me? Didn't you?" Lo was shocked and afraid of him, and he said, "No, how could I dare?" At the same time, Lo was curious about why Aden suddenly acting like this. He was about to quit soon anyway, and he was confused if should he just quit now. According to him, it's so thrilling to see this jerk squirm. For the first time, he was happy to be in this ruffian's body. However, Aden tapped his shoulder and said that this was no good. He told him to come to his training ground this evening, and Lo was shocked at that moment. Nonetheless, Aden took a step and he just tapped Lo's shoulder and told him that he could fix his hand. Then he was startled at that moment, and Aden just smirked at him. Instantaneously, he turned back and left. According to Aden, even meeting like this is fate, and considering the debt he owes him, he'd give him a small gift. Meanwhile, when the night comes, Aden was waiting for Lo at his training ground. At this moment, he looked up and suddenly he was startled upon seeing Lo was there. Then Lo asked him how he knew his secret, but it was no more important. Lo gritted his teeth and he started crying at that moment. Then he asked Aden if he really fixed his arm. In their previous life, a desperate wish that Lo left unfulfilled in his previous life. Aden repaid the last debt and he owes him with this. As stated by Lo, if his right arm were fine, he could have lived as just an ordinary knight. At the present time, Lo was holding his hand and he asked Aden if he could really fix his arm. Then Aden asked him if his right arm was stiffening, and according to Lo, he'd never told anyone about it, but Aden knew his secret. Even he doesn't know why his arm is like this. However, Aden told him that his arm was inflicted with mana severance syndrome. Then Lo was suddenly shocked at that moment. Mana severance syndrome refers to all disabilities that occur in the mana channels, which is why his arm has been stiffening. But there's a major problem. Then he asked Aden if it wasn't mana severance syndrome incurable. And Aden told him yes, people say it's incurable. Lo was startled and asked him if didn't he just say it could be cured. But Aden just looked at him and in his mind, it's not impossible, they just don't know how. The cure will be discovered in about 10 years. Then he told Lo that he knew the cure and he was more than willing to treat his arm. And Lo just looked at him upon hearing Aden telling him, but then Aden smiled and said that there's nothing free in this world and they will write a contract. Lo immediately checked it and he was shocked. In the contract, it was written that the first condition was that he would spar with Aden Remes every day. The second condition is he will sweat to do anything that Aden commands. All of a sudden, Lo was mad and said that this was almost like a slave contract. Then Aden smiled and said that he was right, and he asked him if he didn't like it. Nonetheless, Lo sighed and he was confused about how can he trust Aden. Besides, he said it was incurable at first, but now he says he can cure it. Even so, Lo was curious if shouldn't he grabs at every straw he could. Then he told Aden that he had no choice anyway, and he would accept it. Then Aden just laughed and in his mind, to think there will be a day in which he makes him his slave. And it was an exhilarating moment. As a bonus, as a reward for treating his arm, he'd take that item as well. While he was laughing, Lo was looking at him and according to him, this seems very dangerous. Then suddenly the Underlord said that as expected of the Dragon Slayer King, he should be on their side, but Aden told him to shut up. A few days later, in the small town of Maryland, Lo was riding a carriage and he asked Aden if he was sure this was the place, but no matter how he thought about it, this place is weird. Then Aden was asking him if he was doubting him and Lo was afraid, and he told him no. Suddenly, the carriage had stopped and the coachman told them that they had arrived. Instantaneously, they went down and Aden told Lo to follow him. But at this moment, he was worried if is there really a way to fix his arm in a place like this. However, he just kept following Aden at that moment. Then suddenly, they stopped in this drugstore, but there was a notice that this isn't a clinic, so they can stop coming there. And no, they don't make drugs either, so druggists get lost. Nonetheless, Aden touched the door, and in his mind, this was the place Lo came to in the past to cure his disease. There was supposedly someone there who was researching a cure for Mana severance syndrome. Instantaneously, Aden opened the door and said that it didn't work out in the end, though. Then Lo asked if is there anyone there, and he told Aden that it seemed the owner was not present. Suddenly, Lo saw a huge painting in front, and he asked Aden what he thought this painting depicted. Then Aden said that it was the Philosopher's Stone. It's a superstition believed by mages and alchemists. An imaginary object said to interfere with the domain of gods. Something that supposedly can even bring the dead back to life, an absurd notion. But considering he'd transcended the divine realms of death and time, it might be possible. All of a sudden, someone spoke and said, "Goodness, that's a story not many ordinary people would know. You're well informed, aren't you?" Then Aden said that he'd heard things here and there. But in his mind, Kulsis and Shora would occasionally talk about it. Then this lady said that it's been a while since they've had an interesting guest. But what to do? As the sign says, they don't do business. At this point, Aden told Lo to step outside for a moment, and Lo immediately followed him. Then he went out. Aden called the lady Cassie and told her to get straight to the point. Then Cassie told him that he even knew his name. Aden told him that his knight is currently suffering from the Mana severance syndrome, and he knows she is interested in this disease. Beastkin alchemist, Cassie. This lady was shocked at that moment. Then she immediately removed her hoodie and asked Aden how much did he know. Aden took a step and said who knows. Then he pointed at her and said that like her, his knight is also afflicted with Mana severance syndrome. Cassie was suddenly shocked at that moment, and she asked Aden how do he know that. Then she raised his weapon and Aden told her that he knew that his symptoms were more severe than usual. Without those herb leaves, her condition will keep worsening. According to Aden, Lo's condition stopped at his arm, but Cassie's is different. Her disease has affected all her organs, making her critically ill. Nonetheless, Cassie sighed and asked him, "You know a lot about me, don't you, young master?" But she told him that there's one thing he's mistaken about. It's true that she's researching a cure, but she hasn't found the method yet. This means she can't cure his cute knight's arm. Then Aden told her that if she cured his knight's arm, he promised to protect her and support her research in their territory. Cassie was about to tell him something about his knight's disease, but at this point, Aden showed her something and told her to read this. Then Cassie read it immediately, and she was suddenly shocked upon seeing it. Aden told him that this was the cure for Mana severance syndrome. But in his mind, Kulsis talked about it so much that he memorized it, and he doesn't remember it perfectly. But that's why he sought her out, because he needed someone who could understand even with the incomplete information. Then he asked Cassie if is it still impossible now, and Cassie told him to give her half a month. To think there would be such a method, and he really got him there. However, Aden smirked and told her that it would be difficult to obtain the medicinal ingredients listed there with her resources, and Cassie asked him that the fact that he brought it up meant he wanted something in return, right? Then Aden pointed at her ring and told her to give it to her, but Cassie told him that he was so naughty. Nevertheless, Aden told her that enough with the jokes, and he already knew the true purpose of that ring. But Cassie asked him that he must also know how important this ring is to her. According to Aden, the Ring of Swiftness is the second reason he came there. An artifact that triples your physical speed for 10 seconds, 3 times a day. A very useful item for surprise attacks, escaping, enduring battles. Aden, thanks to this artifact, which Lo received as a memento in his previous life, even with one arm, was able to become S rank. Such an artifact would be the only means of defense for someone like Cassie with her physical limitations. However, Aden told her that he promised to protect her. If she comes to the Duke's house, she won't need such a thing anymore. And he asked her what does she think. Then Cassie told him that she didn't mind as long as she could continue her research, but she asked Aden if he was sure about this. According to her, rumors will spread that he took in a female beastkin as a guest at the Duke's house. But Aden told her that he was Aden Remes, the notorious scoundrel noble. People can talk all they want for all he cares. Then this lady was shocked at that moment. Cassie just smirked and told him that he was an interesting person. In an instant, Cassie gave him the ring and told him to take care of her room and food. And Aden told her that it'll be better than this place. But she has to earn her keep. Meanwhile, at the Duke's house, Duke Remes's mansion, it felt awkward at first, but now it truly feels like home. All of a sudden, Philip was running, and he was looking for their young master. Then Aden asked him what was the matter, and Philip told him that it was an emergency. Aden was shocked upon hearing Philip say that young Master Carl had gone missing in the Monster Mountain. Philip told him that 2 days ago, a report came in about a person going missing in the Monster Mountain. So young Master Carl formed an investigation team and set off, but he hasn't returned yet. According to Aden, the Monster Mountain should only have insignificant monsters though. Then he asked Philip what about the search team, and Philip said that they were about to depart soon. Aden was mad and in his mind, if he disappeared, he'd have to take on the heir position of the duchy. Then all his plans for revenge will be ruined, and he has to save him. Nonetheless, he told Philip that he needed to join the search team and that he must show Cassie to her room. But Philip was shocked at that moment, and Aden told Cassie that he had a favor to ask. Then Cassie asked him what favor. Meanwhile, Aden meets his father, and his father asks him if he is saying that he wants to join the search team. Then Aden told him yes. But his father told him no, and Aden was startled and asked him why. According to his father, Carl and dozens of knights have gone missing at the same time. This is not a simple missing persons case, and he can't send Aden to such a dangerous place. Then suddenly, Aden cried and said that Carl was his brother, but his father was startled. Nonetheless, Aden continued crying, and in his mind, if something happens to him, his plan will be ruined. Suddenly the Underlord told him that he was a bit disgusting dragon slayer king, and Aden told him to shut up. All of a sudden, his father hugged him tight and said that he couldn't believe he cared so much for his brother. Then he could, but he must be careful. At that moment, Aden was laughing. Then his father called Spiel and told him that he was counting on him to take care of Aden since he was the only one he could trust. So Spiel told him yes, and he would be sure to do so. But according to Aden, it was a damn burden and such a hassle. Meanwhile, at Monster Mountain, this man was the Remes Knight Order Vice Captain, Sir Spiel. At that moment, they were walking in the forest, and he said that, as he thought, they seemed to have been attacked. Their tracks disappeared from there. Suddenly, Aden picked up a sword and said that this blade was a weapon used by goblins. According to him, there are too many strange points there. Carl and the knights are overpowered by mere goblins, and these low-intelligence goblins erase their tracks, and there's only one explanation. The Goblin King, the Hobgoblin, possesses intelligence and strength on a different level from regular goblins. If it's them, it's possible. Then he told Sir Spiel that it looked like there were hobgoblins, and Spiel was shocked at that moment. He told Aden that they're a tough match even for him, and they should prepare and then come back. But Aden told him that no, time is very crucial right now. If they delay even a little, they'll all be eaten, and bring a search dog. Then Sir Spiel told him that they'd already had search dogs on the case, but it seemed the scent had been completely erased and they should try something else. But Aden told him to stop talking and just bring a dog quickly. In an instant, this dog appeared, and Aden smiled and said, "Good boy." All of a sudden, Aden opened this bottle and poured it into the dog's mouth. Sir Spiel was shocked, and he was confused about what Aden was doing with the search dog. Then this search dog smells something, and suddenly he barks. Sir Spiel was shocked, and he was curious about what happened to him. Then Aden told him that it was a scent enhancement potion. According to him, he was glad that he asked Cassie to get it before they left, and it was useful for search missions in his previous life. At this point, the search dog started walking, and Aden told the knights that they would now go. When the night comes, they arrive at the goblin village. Then suddenly Spiel told Aden to look over there. At this point, he saw Carl and others, and then Spiel told Aden that young Master Carl and the other knights were all there. They were still alive. Aden just sighed and said that they were not too late. But Spiel told him that there's something seemed off, and Aden told him right. All of a sudden, these goblins appeared, and Aden was confused about how can there be 3 leaders in one village. Nonetheless, Spiel told his companion that this was more serious than he thought. Everyone must be prepared to give it their all, and their opponents are hobgoblins who are a match even for decent knights. Then he told young Master Aden that during the fight, he must rescue the hostages and escape with them. Aden agreed with him and said that he'd do that. But in his mind, it's unbelievable that there are 3 leaders, but with this many knights, they can handle them without him. Instantaneously, Spiel grabbed his sword, and all of them were about to attack their opponents. Then these goblins were startled, and they were also ready for the attack. Spiel was heading to their opponent and said, "How dare you lay a hand on young Master Carl?" While they were about to fight, Aden suddenly jumped off while stating that he'd wiped them all out. Then these hostages were shocked upon seeing them, and one of them said that they're saved. In an instant, Aden hit the lock using his dagger and asked them if is everyone okay. Then all of them were shocked at that moment, and Carl was startled upon seeing him. Nonetheless, Aden untied the rope in their hands and told them that knights would provide support, and villagers, they must run away quickly. But in his mind, he guesses that it was time for him to sneak out now. All of a sudden, Carl tapped him and told him to be careful since there was a monster. But Aden asked him if it was a monster or a hobgoblin. But Carl shouted at him and said, "Behind you, Aden." At this point, Aden was confused, and the hobgoblin was ready to attack him. All of a sudden, the monster attacked him, and it caused an explosion at that moment. Luckily, Aden managed to dodge it, and according to him, he overlooked something. The reason there were 3 hobgoblins, it's because there was a higher-ranking creature than hobgoblins there. The worst monster among human-shaped demon, a troll. Then Aden told Carl to take the villagers and run away first. But Carl told him that it was a troll and he might die. Aden just smiled and told him that he knew it was a troll, and he would not die. He was an older brother. But Carl silently said, "So what? He's just a damn scoundrel." However, Aden held his sword at this moment and he jumped off, and he was heading to the monster. But this monster punched the ground, and luckily, Aden managed to dodge it, and he slashed the monster's leg. Then the monster kneeled and he felt the pain at that moment. But his wound was slowly healed. Aden was panting, and according to him, as expected of a troll, its regenerative power was tremendous. He can't defeat it with his normal strength. Nonetheless, he just smirked and the monster was mad and ready to attack him. All of a sudden, Aden jumped off again and the monster clenched his fist. Suddenly, Spiel shouted and told Aden that he would handle this, and he swung his sword. Then he gritted his teeth, and in his mind, hobgoblins are already tough enough, but a troll too, and Aden must hold on a little longer. But this monster troll clenched his fist at that moment, and he attacked Aden, but he managed to dodge. Then he smirked and said that he had Cassie give him this just in case. Now's the time to use it. All of a sudden, he activated the Ring of the Swiftness, and the time remaining was 10 seconds. According to him, in this life, he hasn't reached that stage yet, but with this ring, it's possible. At this point, the time remaining is 8 seconds, and suddenly, Aden slashed this troll's hand and the monster was enraged. Then Aden attacked him many times in all parts of his body. This troll shouted and he was mad, but Aden prepared his sword, and there were flames on it. Then suddenly, he slashed this troll's head, and it was cut off. As he stated, this is the stage of sword aura. Spiel said that this side was finished, and he told the knight behind him to hurry, and they would help the young master Aden. While he was looking at Aden, he was confused about what is that blue energy on his sword. But the energy was so fast, and unfortunately, Aden was thrown at this tree. He landed on a tree with a bird's nest, and Aden said that his whole body hurt. According to him, he barely used sword aura for 10 seconds, yet his body won't move. He had to use the Ring of Swiftness cautiously, but it was definitely effective. Meanwhile, the next day at the Duke's house, Aden's father stated, "I see, so many people were injured." Then he told Spiel to ensure that the bereaved families and victims receive the maximum compensation within his power. Spiel told him all right, but Duke asked him if is it true that Aden defeated this troll. Then Spiel told him that yes, he, along with the knights, witnessed it. Duke said that Aden not only used sword aura, but also defeated a troll. He was confused about, is this really the son that he knew? However, during the night, Aden was meditating at that moment, and he was surrounded by flames at that moment. According to him, even though it was just for a moment, by using sword aura his sword, he felt his mana capacity increase. Then he clenched his fist and said that he realized something clearly this time, and he was still weak. He needs to become even stronger so he can crush them. All of a sudden, there was a little dragon appeared and said that he liked that determination quite a bit. At that moment, Aden was shocked upon seeing him. He asked him where he came from, and he was familiar with that voice. Then this little dragon laughed and said, "You caught on to it, huh? That's right, the Lord of the Underworld." The Underlord. Aden was mad and the Underlord told him not to laugh. But Aden laughed loudly and he was teasing the Underlord about his look. Then he told Aden that this was all his fault. It was because he was so weak. Nonetheless, Aden continued laughing and asked him how he showed himself. But the Underlord told him that only he can see him. They both are one, and as he grows stronger, it seems he can manifest himself to this extent. Then Aden asked him if he had to keep seeing him from now on since he didn't like it. But the Underlord asked him if it wasn't a rude thing to say to his savior. At this point, Aden was confused and stated that, "Underlord, no wait, you said Underlord is a curse passed down by the demon god, and you've been freed from that curse because the link with the demon god was severed, right? So what's your original name?" but according to the Underlord, he lost his name long ago and he just exists now. Then he was shocked when Aden told him that his name from now on will be cursed, and he was confused about it. Aden told him that since he was a curse that was placed on him, his name was a curse. Then the Underlord asked him if it wasn't that too silly, but Aden told him to shut up. Underlord sighed and smirked, and he told Aden that he really didn't budge. But he told Aden that he could call him whatever he wanted since he's doing it on purpose. Meanwhile, 1 week later, Aden went to Cassie's room and he knocked on the door. Then he opened it and asked Cassie if the treatment was going well. Cassie was startled and said, "Oh my, the troll master has come to visit." But Aden gritted his teeth and in his mind, they call him the troll master because he killed a troll. It sounds like they're saying he looks like a troll and he doesn't like it. Why can't they call him Troll Slayer? However, he asked Cassie where's Lo and she told him that the cute knight was inside. Then Aden immediately checked on Lo and he was startled upon seeing him. At this point, Lo was crying and said that his arm was moving and it was back to normal. Instantaneously, he punched the floor and Aden was startled. Then Lo stated, "Thank you, young master, for recognizing and treating my condition. Though I am but a lowly being, I swear to dedicate my life to you." Aden was laughing and told him that he gladly accepted his pledge. But in his mind, it was right and from now on, he'd work him like a slave. Then he asked Cassie if she hadn't undergone treatment. Cassie smiled and said that her mana severance syndrome is a bit unusual, he sees. It needs a bit more research, maybe another month. Then Aden told her that she did a good job and Cassie smiled. Then told him that not at all. It's thanks to the method he told her about. And she called him again as Troll Master. Aden was annoyed at that moment and he shouted at Lo that if he was completely healed, then come out quickly since they have work to do. Then Lo smiled and said, "Yes, understood, sir. Give me any task." Meanwhile, when Lo got healed, he was mad that Aden gave him physical labor for his first task. And suddenly, he shouted and said, "Somebody save me." However, while he was panting, suddenly someone came and he welcomed the young master. Then he was shocked when he saw the troll in his front and he asked Aden if that was the troll that he caught. According to him, it should fetch a good price because trolls are rare materials. Nonetheless, Aden told him that he'd like to use the proceeds from selling the troll to purchase those herbs, and he asked the fat guy if is that possible. Then this man smiled and told him that of course, their merchant group had everything. But suddenly, he told Aden that those aren't herbs, but are poisonous plants. Suddenly, he was trembling in fear when Aden smiled at him and asked him if he said they were herbs. Then they're herbs. So it's possible, right? Then the man just laughed and told him that of course, they're definitely herbs. But he was confused that if he got on this ruffian's bad side, who knows what might happen. However, that guy left and at that moment, Aden blew his lips and in his mind, easy money is always nice. Then suddenly, the Underlord told him that it seemed the habits of a mercenary within him hadn't changed, but Aden told him to shut up. All of a sudden, Philip was shocked when he called their young master and Aden asked him what's the matter. Then Philip told him that the Duke's asking for him, and Aden was shocked after hearing it. Then he went to his father's room and at that moment, he heard they were laughing inside, and Aden just knocked on the door. Aden opened it and he asked his father if he was calling for him. But suddenly he was puzzled at that moment. Then his father said that he was there, and the other man smirked and said, "Oh, so you're Aden." Aden was startled and he was just speechless, but at the same time, he was confused about what is that guy doing there. Nonetheless, this man told him that judging by his appearance, it looked like the rumors about him slaying a troll were true, and it was a pleasure to meet him. All of a sudden, Aden remembered him, but according to him, he didn't have any pleasant memories of him. Then suddenly, Underlord asked him if he knew him, and Aden told him that he knew him a bit. He was an old man who looked down on mercenaries. However, Aden told him that it was nice to meet him, and he was Aden Remes. Then Aden said greetings to the protector of the northeastern border, Margrave Tyrid Sedis. This man was surprised and he asked Aden if he knew him. Then Aden told him that of course, according to him, Margrave Sedis is one of the few in the Empire who has reached the stage of Sword Master. At this point, Margrave Sedis was just smiling. Nonetheless, Sword Master is a transcendental stage that all knights dream of. Those who surpass the realm of talent and enter the realm of superhumanity can cleave mountains with their swords and can make the air tremble with their breaths. Aden Albireo was one of them in the past, and it's the stage he needs to reach again. All of a sudden, Margrave Sedis was laughing, and he told Aden that he was polite, contrary to the rumors. Then he told Duke that he'd raised a fine son, and Duke said that Aden still had a lot to learn. However, Duke asked Margrave if is it all right for him to leave his territory, and he told him that he heard it was attacked by orcs recently. Then Margrave glanced at him and said that it was not just their territory. Suspicious movements have also been detected in the Slaughter Tower in the Wasteland of Death managed by the Slaughter cult. After hearing it, Aden was mad and he gritted his teeth at that moment. According to him, he has some business too at the Slaughter cult. Traitor Iron-Blooded Saintless must wait a bit longer. Nonetheless, Margrave was heading to the Duke and said that Slaughter Tower, Aden, and the Remes. As he stated, unusual monster movements are occurring in 3 different places at the same time. Then he asked the Duke if he thought it was a coincidence. Duke told him that now that he mentioned it, it does seem odd. Then he asked Margrave if he helped them since they were thinking of forming an investigation team. Margrave smiled and said, of course, brother. But suddenly, he grabbed Aden's shoulder and asked him if would he join his Night Order. At that moment, Aden was trembling in fear, and he was confused that the Night Order was out of nowhere. Margrave told Aden that he'd heard a lot about him. He'd reached the stage of sword aura in less than half a year of wielding a sword, and he thought that it was nonsense, but seeing him in person, he can tell. Margrave smirked and said that he would make Aden the greatest swordsman on the Western continent, and he promised on his name. Duke was about to tell him something about Aden, but Margrave just smiled and told him not to worry, and that he'd take good care of Aden. Then Margrave asked Aden what he thought since it was his choice. At that moment, Aden was speechless, but suddenly he smirked. Then he told Margrave that he appreciated the offer, but he must decline, and Margrave was startled at that moment. However, Margrave asked Aden if he understood what it meant to join the Aden Night Order. Then Aden smiled and told him that he did. It's one of the most renowned knightly orders in the Empire, but he's confident that he can become a sword master on his own. But in his mind, he has already experienced that stage in the past, so reaching it again is just a matter of time. He told Margrave that right now, even if he were to fight Margrave, he could at least scratch him. At this point, Margrave was shocked and Duke was just trembling in fear. But Margrave just laughed and he told Aden that it's unbelievably rude. All of a sudden, the table was shaking and Margrave became powerful, and he told Aden that he was an amazing guy. Aden was angrily looking at him and according to him, the ability to make even the air tremble with his murderous aura, Master Fear, and it's expected as a sword master. Aden couldn't believe Margrave was holding out against Master Fear. Nonetheless, Margrave asked him if he was sure he could stand by his words. Then Aden smiled and said of course, and he asked Margrave if should they make a bet. Margrave was suddenly shocked and confused at that moment. According to Aden, Margrave has always had a weakness for bets. Then he told Margrave that if he couldn't give a single scratch on him, he'd join their Night Order. But if Aden wins, Margrave must give him that sword he has. Upon hearing it, Margrave was startled, but he was mad. Then suddenly, he laughed and told Aden, how audacious, to think Aden covets his family heirloom. And he told Duke that Aden was completely different from him. All of a sudden, Duke couldn't withstand his master's fear and fainted. Then Margrave told Aden that he had accepted that bet. Suddenly, Underlord told Aden that he was aiming for that sword from the start. Aden told him, yes, and he got to take a sword like that when the opportunity arises. However, as stated by Aden, this is the Beelzebub, one of the legendary swords. Meanwhile, outside the mansion, Aden and Margrave were both ready. Then Aden asked Margrave if he was planning to use an ogre-slaying sword against goblins, and Margrave told him that he didn't know if he was a goblin or an ogre, and regardless of who the opponent is, it's a knight's duty to give their best. At this point, Aden was speechless, and in his mind, that damn knightly courtesy, that one thing never changes, may it be past or present. There are 2 conditions for the match, no use of the aura blade, and Margrave Tyreed Sued will not move his right foot. According to Aden, it may seem unfair, but to a sword master, that's not even a handicap. If he charged in thoughtlessly, he'd be knocked out immediately. However, Margrave told him that they have quite an audience and they must get started. Then Aden raised his sword and said gladly. All of a sudden, Aden jumped off and Margrave was startled at that moment. At this point, Aden pointed his sword at Margrave, but he blocked it with his sword. Then he told Aden that going for the neck right from the start, he's used to real combat. Nonetheless, Aden landed on the ground and swung his sword, and he told Margrave that he knew him and that he would block it. And in his mind, as expected, Margrave blocked it easily. Then he attacked him many times, but Margrave managed to block every time he attacked him. Margrave was confused and asked, "What is this unrefined swordsmanship?" According to him, it's like the swordsmanship of ragtag mercenaries, and he told Aden that if he joined their knight order, they'd have to fix it. Nevertheless, Aden was mad, and suddenly he was heading to Margrave, and he would see how he handled this ragtag swordsmanship. At this point, Margrave just smiled and said that he was not going to lose to such a simpleton. But he was shocked when he saw Aden's sword was in another direction. Then he was almost hit with a sword and he was confused. All of them were shocked, and the man on the right asked if Lord Aden was pushing forward right now. According to the man in the center, it seems like a rumor about Lord Aden defeating a troll wasn't a lie. Nonetheless, the Duke was looking at them, and in his mind, even though Margrave received quite a penalty, he was a sword master. But he was confused if is it reasonable to say his son is holding his own against him. At this point, Margrave was enraged and he attacked Aden many times, but he managed to block it. Margrave was confused about what on earth is this strange swordsmanship. He said that it's chaotic but precisely targets vital points. Margrave gritted his teeth and said that he must take this fellow with him. All of a sudden, Aden was shocked upon seeing that Margrave swung his sword and he almost hit it, but still he managed to dodge. But Aden was confused if Margrave was merely swinging the sword. Then suddenly, the Underlord told him that if he tried to block that just now, he'd have been cut in half. Nonetheless, Aden strikes him and Margrave tells him that he's using an interesting sword technique. That's it, that's all he'd got, and he can't defeat him with this much. Then Aden told him that he was still standing and he could continue. But Margrave just laughed at him and said that he never disappoints him and his eyes are sharp. Then he smiled and told Aden welcome in advance for joining his knight's order. Nevertheless, Aden just smirked and thanked him in advance as well. Then both of them prepared and raised their swords. All of a sudden, Aden moved fast and Margrave was shocked at that moment. He was confused that Aden could move at this speed, and it didn't seem like it. According to him, Aden was hiding his skills and he was deceived. But at this point, Aden just passed by him and he got scratched at his shoulder. Then Aden smirked and said that he'd used Margrave's weapon Beelzebub. The people that were watching them were confused what was that now and if is it over. Then suddenly, all of them were cheering and Duke remained shocked at that moment. Aden was stunned and said that they won, and a man suddenly shouted behind him and called him Troll Master. Then the other man said that he believed in him. However, Underlord asked him if isn't he bothered that he used that ring, but Aden was just confused about it. The Underlord told him that he seemed more suited to the underworld than a hero or a dragon slayer. Nevertheless, Aden asked him if he was unhappy and why fidgeting. Or should he hit him with the holy potion again? Then Aden told him that well, he guessed he was a hero, or maybe a hero that cheated. But Aden asked him what was with this cheat. At this point, Margrave told Aden that as expected, he didn't disappoint him. Luring him into complacency by hiding his skills, he's not an average opponent. But Aden told him that it was luck, nothing more. Nevertheless, the Underlord told him that even pretending to be humble, he's quite cheeky, a hero cheat. Nonetheless, Aden was shocked and according to him, he thought he'd lose an arm, but it was just a scratch. At this point, Margrave handed him the Beelzebub sword and told him to take it as he promised. It's his sword now. Then Aden immediately received it and told him thank you, and he'd handle it with care. Aden smiled and in his mind, this was jackpot. Then the Underlord told him that his expressions were crude, but Aden told him that he was so noisy, cursed one. Meanwhile, at the Duke's house, Aden was in his room and he was looking at the Beelzebub sword and said that indeed a legendary sword. Then Underlord congratulated him and called him a dragon slayer. But suddenly, Aden looked at Underlord and asked him what happened to the guy who called him a cheat just a moment ago. Then Underlord laughed and told Aden that he didn't know how to use that sword properly. Aden was startled and confused at that moment, and the Underlord told him that he knew the secret of legendary swords that humans were unaware of. Then Aden asked him what a secret or a curse. Aden was looking at the sword and Underlord was laughing and said that he would not tell him for free. If he swears to him as a king and never makes him drink holy potion for the rest of his life. All of a sudden, there was blood in this sword and Aden was holding it tightly. Then there was a system that popped up and it stated that he'd made a pact of blood pact. Aden looked at the Underlord and Underlord was just confused about it. Nonetheless, Aden just smirked and asked Underlord if don't his subordinates wield dark swords, and he thought Aden wouldn't know about it. Beelzebub is one of the legendary 72 swords. The 72 swords appear to be simple, sturdy blades on the surface, but in reality, they were created from the bodies of corrupt lords who once ruled the ancient underworld. It was only revealed much later that they were cursed swords. Each sword harbors the power of a different corrupt lord. According to Aden, one of the 3 conditions to awaken their hidden power is to feed them blood and form a blood contract. But Underlord told him that it was frustrating, and he could have gained the upper hand for the first time. Nevertheless, Aden was mad and confused that he would serve him as a king, but he was already dead. Then he told him to prepare to drink 1 holy potion per day. Nonetheless, the Underlord apologizes to him. Meanwhile, the next day, Duke was writing at that moment, and he asked Aden if he was saying that he'd join the Tyreed Lord's search party. Aden told his father, yes. Nevertheless, Duke was worried, and he told Aden that he knew he was strong, but this search was dangerous. It's a place incomparable to the Demon Mountain, and it's difficult for him to grant permission. But Aden insisted that he was going with Lord Margrave Tyreed. Then Margrave just laughed, and he told Duke that he agreed, but he didn't need to worry. He'd ensure his son's safety, no matter what it takes. At this point, Duke just sighed, and he told Aden that this wasn't a picnic. Then Aden told his father that he understood, and he asked him if that wasn't the investigation for the safety of their territory. Aden said that if it's for their territory, he wants to go too. Suddenly, Margrave grabbed his shoulder, and he told Duke to allow him. Then he asks Duke if it isn't courageous for a son to step up for his father. Duke was just speechless, and he was startled at that moment. Nonetheless, Aden just smiled and in his mind, well said. In his previous life, he was useless, but this time, he's proving his worth. But Underlord told him that for the Duke's sake, but he countered and said it's probably for Beelzebub's awakening. Then Aden said that there was no way. The second condition to awaken the sword is absorbing an enormous amount of life force into it. Defeating a monster and gaining life force, how delightful. Aden showed his tongue and said, wait, monster, and Underlord told him that it was the first time he'd felt sorry for monsters. However, meanwhile at Piran Mountains. At this point, there was a strange happened in the forest. Wolf and monster were running and suddenly this orge was laughing. Going back to Aden, at that moment they arrived at this place. Then Aden was shocked and according to him, this is the fortress of Attila, built to ward off the demonic beasts of the Piran Mountains. According to him, the facilities and the soldiers are all a mess. At this rate, it seems they'd struggle with even a single goblin horde. He was confused about how are they keeping out the monsters. All of a sudden, one soldier welcomed them. Then this man said that he was Dasvald Timon, the chief officer of Attila Fortress. Welcome, our distinguished guests, Sword Master Margrave Tyreed, and the Troll Master, young Master Aden Remes, Dasvald stated. Then these 2 guards were gossiping at him and the man on the right was confused and asked if he was the notorious ruffian young master. But his companion told him no, not a ruffian scoundrel, he's the Troll Master, and then he laughed. According to the man on the right, rumor has it that he slew a troll, hence the name Troll Master became his nickname. But his companion told him that it was nonsense. He's probably called that because he looks like a troll. Upon hearing it, Lo was mad and he was about to get his swords, but Aden stopped him. Then Underlord was asking him how unusual of him to stay calm after hearing such words. Aden said that fighting won't do any good, and he'd heard it so many times that it doesn't anger him anymore. Suddenly, Margrave asked that it was because the air there was so fresh that there were lots of bugs. Then he said that the bugs were making a lot of noise. All of a sudden, he asked Dasvald Timon if he wasn't that right and Timon laughed at that moment and said that the air was fresh. At that moment, these soldiers were annoyed, but Aden just smirked, and in his mind, that man knows how to be an ass. However, they entered the fortress of Attila, and they were now walking. Then Dasvald Timon said that he heard the news that there had been monster attacks in each territory. Aden was startled, and he asked him if anything had happened there. And Dasvald Timon said that there's no need for their Attila fortress to worry. At that moment, Aden was mad, and in his mind, he was just bearing with it. Then Margrave asked Dasvald about monsters living right in front of the fortress. He's saying there's no danger. Dasvald told him that yes, it was because the orcs had settled in the middle of the mountain range. Maybe it's because of the orcs that the monsters don't come down to the territory. Upon hearing it, Aden was confused that the monsters keeping other monsters at bay. Suddenly, he was startled when the Underlord called him and said that there's something massive was coming. Then Aden immediately looked down and he was confused about what Underlord told him, and he told him that he didn't see anything. But all of a sudden, Aden was shocked and he was puzzled. Then he told Dasvold Timon that monsters were approaching and they needed to close the gates, and Dasvold was just confused about it. Suddenly, he laughed and he told Aden that his jokes had gone too far. Monsters, out of nowhere. But Margrave told him to close the gates. Then he was shocked that even Margrave told him to close the gate. He felt the shake of the building. He was confused about what was that. Margrave told him that it was a monster wave. At this point, a lot of monsters were heading to their territory. These 3 guards were shocked, and the man in the center shouted and asked Dasvold what should they do. But Dasvold was trembling in fear and he couldn't manage to command his guards. Then Margrave shouted to them, "What are they waiting for? Close the gates first." And they immediately followed him. At that moment, they were in a hurry, and they were almost done closing the gate. Unfortunately, there was a beast who already entered their territory, and the beast was about to attack the soldier, and this man was so frightened at that moment. Fortunately, Aden jumped off and slashed the giant beast, and it died. Nonetheless, Aden was startled, and according to him, it's not enough to make a difference, but still, it's pretty good at draining life energy. Then one soldier was shocked, and he was confused if that ruffian just used sword aura, and he said that maybe the troll master rumors are true. Underlord was teasing him and calling him troll master, but Aden was annoyed, and he told him to shut up. Then Underlord told him that he's always especially harsh on him, but Aden told him that whatever he says feels disgusting. All of a sudden, this soldier bowed his head and thanked Aden for saving him, and at that moment, Aden was startled. Then he glanced at him and told him that instead of thanking him, grab a weapon and defend the wall. Suddenly, Lo came, and he asked Aden if he was all right, but Aden was just silent. Then he told Lo to look at this, and Lo was shocked upon seeing a lot of monsters at the gate. Lo said that it was a massive number of monsters. All of a sudden, Aden laughed and said that from now on, these guys will be his daily snacks. Lo was shocked and confused at that moment. Then he looked at his swords and he was talking to it, and asked if the Beelzebub sword wanted to devour them. But Aden was annoyed and he was curious about what he was even saying. Suddenly, the Underlord laughed at him and said that he guessed even the Dragon Slayer King couldn't help it. According to the Underlord, Beelzebub is the sword of gluttony. It draws out the gluttonous instincts of its wielder, and he told Aden that he enjoyed listening to his true feelings. Aden was irritated and said that he needed to be careful. But since he's there to awaken Beelzebub, he'd thankfully devour all this life energy. Nonetheless, Margrave called him and said that he'd return after some cleaning up. Then Aden was startled, and he told him that he'd handle it and he could have a rest. All of a sudden, Margrave flew away and Aden was shocked while shouting no at that moment. While Margrave was flying above, the monsters were looking at him. But Margrave was confused about whether should he clean them up all at once since it's a hassle. These soldiers were shocked, and the man on the left said that it was the aura blade. According to him, it is something only a sword master can use. Aden was mad and stated no. At least leave me half of it. No, even a quarter will do. Please. At this point, Margrave was suddenly attacking all the monsters, and they were now dead. Then he came back, and he was laughing at that moment. He said that it's been a while since he'd used his strength properly, and it feels great. Aden was wiping his tears, and he was confused about why he come there. However, Dasvold thanked them both, and he thanked Margrave and said that they repelled the monster without much damage. At this point, Aden was speechless, and the Underlord called him, but he asked him if he was there to mock him again. But he told Aden that what he was talking about wasn't a monster wave. Aden was confused, and he told Underlord to be more specific. The Underlord repeated and said that the massive thing he spoke of wasn't the monster wave. And Aden was shocked at that moment. Then he asked the Underlord that if it's not the monster wave, then what? Suddenly, Aden was shocked and puzzled when he saw a huge flame above, and he told everyone to get out there. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you wish to have another manhwa recap like this, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel so you will be updated for more content like this. Until next time.